Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Eternals and the new MCU film that's releasing in theaters. And this film tells the story of these beings known as Eternals who were sent to Earth 7,000 years ago by the Celestials that created everything, it appears. And they were sent to Earth to try to help advance us, and maybe for some other reasons. There's a lot of things hidden in this film, and I'm going to avoid all forms of spoilers, but I do have to say there's quite a few things that happen in this movie that are pretty unexpected. Certain characters, certain motivations, certain ideas, and what this film does in particular is grow the scope of these Marvel movies. And in hindsight, I think it kind of belittles a bit of what's come up to this point, because at this point it's just like, this is just like this big thing, like bigger than anything we could have ever imagined, and now it's just like, where do you go from here? And it's interesting because we do get after the credit scenes that kind of point to where we're going with this, and obviously things are just going to keep getting bigger, more characters, just widening all of this. And this was from director Chloe Zhao, who I love the writer. I really like Nomadland, and like these are really beautiful films too. And you get this film where, you know, this was over 2.5 hours. I never felt bored. I felt like this film was always moving, and I think Zhao does a great job in terms of that. I think the action was interesting enough, and like incorporating all the different Eternals and their different powers and stuff like that. Some of them are more interesting than others, and I'll get into the characters in a little bit. But I think the action was pretty cool. I thought the effects were really well done. Some of the shots were just breathtaking to look at. And, you know, they do lay down some decent amount of exposition in this movie, and it could get bogged down at times, especially when it's just like talking at you. But I think this film is a little too ambitious and trying to do a little too much. And there might be things in this movie that seem so important, but then kind of become afterthoughts because they kind of felt like red herrings to begin with. And that doesn't always sit well, because then they still feel like they have to have some kind of resolution, and then you spend a bunch of time on them when in the grand scheme of things, they're really not that important. And, you know, you have these Eternals, and parts of this movie are flashbacks to them pre what's going on specifically during the modern time of the film. And how this all pulls together, and how it links to like Thanos and the blip and all that kind of stuff. And what's really going on in this film is kind of messed up and challenging. And this film really does push a lot of big moral dilemmas. And I feel like this film is up there with Civil War and Infinity War as some of the only Marvel movies that really dig deep into some of these extremely challenging moral dilemmas, and puts you in a place where you have to really think about it. And this really takes on ideas of religion and does it in a meaningful and interesting way. I feel like thematically this film works very, very well, and it makes you think, it brings these ideas to the forefront, and that works. I think the story and the narrative feels a little muddled, and it feels kind of like Guardians 2, where it's just like, you have antagonists. Some of these antagonists feel pretty like, why are you even here right now, kind of thing. But, you know, they kind of are there. Like, especially in this film, they feel like they're set up to distract you and to bring some twists and turns to the narrative. And some of those twists and turns really work. Some of the other ones are just like, okay, well, I didn't see that coming, so I guess it did work. And, you know, this film does some groundwork and by the end, really setting up for like these bigger ideas and bigger things that are going to happen. And I felt like, we get a decent closure to the specific story in the film, and they do a fine job with that. And you have this collection of characters and actors too. And like going through, you have Gemma Chan right at the front as Cersei, who's our main character, and I think she does a fine job. Cersei has a very different perspective than a lot of the other Eternals. You have Richard Madden as Icarus, and honestly, Richard Madden's a little flat for a decent amount of this film. And there's a couple moments where he has to carry some serious emotion, and they really work. So, like, you can tell he's a good actor. It's just at times he just feels kind of flat. Angelina Jolie's Athena, they deal with a lot of specific things that are challenging and thought-provoking in terms of, like, living this immortal life with her specifically. And I think Angelina Jolie was really up to the task and does a really fine job. You have Salma Hayek as Ajak, the leader of this group, and she does a really fine job. You have Kumail Nanjiani, who plays Kingo, and I really loved his character. He was a lot of fun, and there's another character that comes along with him that is one of the biggest surprises and most fun parts of this movie. But like Kumail has some challenging moral positions in the film, also has a very different perspective than the rest of them in terms of like living like a celebrity lifestyle in future times. You have Liam McHugh, who plays Sprite, who I think has one of the more complex stories in this film. And like some of this stuff's a little on the nose, but like I feel like she gets to really flex her acting chops in this film a lot more than some of the other actors do. And you have Brian Tyree Henry as Fastos, who's fantastic, and he brings a whole another level of energy. You have Lauren Ridloff as Makari, who is a deaf character and a speedster, and I really liked that character. I thought it was a lot of fun. You have Barry Keoghan, who plays Druig, and he brings to the table a lot of the big moral dilemmas and thematic ideas and questions to this film. And, he has a strange presence about him that really works. And then my personal favorite is definitely Ma Dong-seok, who plays Gilgamesh, aka Don Lee. And he is fantastic. I loved him. He has so much charisma. He's a cool fighter. And you have... What's interesting is this film has all these characters, and I feel like everybody gets a little bit of time to breathe, and you get to know them a little bit. So I think they did a fine job of balancing that. They make some interesting choices with some of these characters that I don't know if they fully sat well with me, and how some of the resolutions turned out. And then you have the very end of the film where it just like, where it leaves you, and it opens up for a very interesting story moving forward. And interesting after the credit scenes that set up some more interesting characters and unexpected characters. And in general, like, I feel like the cinematography too it's well shot. It doesn't have the same exact feel as Chloe Zhao's other films, and I think especially because this is Ben Davis doing the actual cinematography here, not her regular cinematographer. And then Ramin Djawadi does a great score here. It really works. And in general, I think this is a big film. It has a lot of ideas. It might buckle under its own weight at times and feel like there's a little bit too much exposition at times. And there's definitely some characters that feel like they're misused or they are really non-consequential at all. And they just kind of feel like what was the point of having them in this film at all? And when it really comes down to it, I think this is a big, epic scale of a film that's sprawling and intense and awe-inspiring. And I'm glad that I got a chance to see it. This is definitely not anywhere near like the top half of the MCU for me, but I did really enjoy this film, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go from this story. But those are my thoughts on Marvel's Eternals. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.